Hey everyone, welcome to episode 9 of Revenue Talent Talk. I'm your host, Chris Gannon, founder of Captivate Talent. Today, it's actually a very special day. First off, we have Morgan Ingram, a 3-time LinkedIn top sales influencer on our show, which I'm super excited about. Saw Morgan at Sassner and said, we got to get together, do something. I miss muffins with Morgan. So I'm really excited to have him on the show today. But also, we're joined by Captivate Talent's very own Jay Desai, our head of marketing. It is his 1-year anniversary, and there was no better way to celebrate than to have him on the show with us. And also, I'll take him out at the end of the week for dinner when I'm down in Austin. So, Morgan, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Excited about this conversation and ready to dive into it.
Yeah, and maybe you could start off, because I'm going to kick it over and let Jay run with this a little bit. But can you just give, for those who don't know you, and I'm not sure if there's many in the SaaS sales community that don't. Can you just give a little bit of an intro of yourself, who you are and what you're currently up to?
Yeah. So as it was stated, Morgan Ingram started off as a sales development rep. So shout out to all my SDRs out there. And then also as well, had a YouTube channel. It's still out there, called the SDR Chronicles. Documented my journey as an SDR. Got promoted to a manager. Worked with John Barrows. Some of you may know who that was or who is. I was there and was there for about 3.5, 4 years and did full-time sales training, trained Slack, Google, Zoom, Snowflake, couple of organizations that you know, on top of the funnel strategy, and excited to be here to talk about what we're going to talk about today. It's going to be an exciting topic, so hopefully y'all are ready.
And Morgan, I have one question before I let Jay jump in that I like to ask all my guests at the beginning. Because we are a recruiting company, jobs, people transitioning, where they started working is always something that we're interested in. What was your first job ever? Like that you got paid for legally.
Legally. Yeah. So this place, this place called Sky Zone Trampoline. So it was indoor trampoline park. It had the dodgeball, had like the foam pit. It was one of the coolest jobs of all time. It was fun. Had a blast.
It was like camp counselor on steroids.
Yes. It was super cool. Like the coworkers were dope. We had a lot of like cool like things that we could do like after, like we would play like dodgeball and stuff. Like it was really cool. I actually enjoyed that as a first job.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
That's great. That's cool. So I know you have a lot of experience, like you mentioned, helping to consult for sales teams and things like that. So what are the things that you've like learned like through that process? Not the trampoline experience, but the sales side of things that you kind of learned, I guess, like helping to work with other sales teams.
So Jay, I gotta ask you a question back. So learn as in like learn in sales or learn overall? Because I have some overall learnings that might like surprise people.
Yeah, I guess a little bit of both as well. And I'm just curious also to kind of learn as well. I'm sure like as you kind of continued on your path of in your career, like I know for me personally, I feel like I've learned how to do things better and better over time, the more times that I do kind of the same action. So kind of speaking a little bit to that as well, like what are some of those things, those key takeaways that you've learned that maybe can help some other people that are listening in to kind of, maybe jump a step on that career growth journey?
Yeah. So one thing that I learned as I was doing more and more trainings is a lot of the things I started in the beginning when I traded, and this was something I had to adjust because it wasn't helping the learner, was I would speak from like my perspective. I'd be like, okay, this is what I did. This is how I went about it. And it's hard for people to take that information and absorb it and do it for themselves when you speak on it in terms of like, this is what I did. So the difference is I took a step back and I said, how can I make this very simple for people? And how can I make a system or a process or a framework out of this so anyone in the world, when they heard me, they could go do it? So I started breaking down every single thing that I do into a framework. So from time management to my morning routine to cold calling to social selling to how I create content, every single thing. You feel like, hey, Morgan, what's the framework for this? I'm like, okay, yeah, here's the framework, because I realized it was easier for people to go and get results when I gave them a framework. And I started seeing more results on the back end when I started doing that with clients. So that's one thing I learned, is keeping things simple and then giving frameworks to people when you coach them or train them. It's easier for them to go execute. Number two is truly understanding. And Jay, I just did it, so you can see it in real time. Like, I always ask follow-up questions to clarify before I answer a question. So sometimes we're like, I know the answer, and you'll just answer, but you actually may not know the answer, so you need to ask a follow-up question. So I always go like, okay, like, what exactly did you mean by that? Or like, could you clarify that for me? Could you define this? Like, I always ask a question typically before I answer a question, because there might be something that I'm missing, and I want to give you the best answer. I don't want to give you an answer that is in my head, because once you do a lot of trainings and you coach a lot of people, you get sometimes you get similar questions. So you're like, I know the answer, but then I'm like, actually, no. Let me ask a question before I even go into this. So there's that. And three is, this is something that I do in my personal life, especially in my professional life, is I always set expectations. Sometimes when you go into selling something, or you go into a meeting, or you even go to training, you're like, okay, I think I know this is how it's going to go. That is a terrible way to approach it. I go in and I'm like, hey, here are the expectations. This is what you're looking to cover. This is what we're going to do with this training. This is what we're going to do with this coaching. This is how we're going to run this consulting gig. Is everyone on the same page? Great. So if in the middle of it, it starts to deviate and it's going in a different direction, or you said, hey, Morgan, that's not what we expected, or we wanted something different, I'm going to be like, no, at the beginning of this entire engagement, I sent you an email and it said, this is our expectations. You didn't mention that. So where did this change? Where's the confusion? How do we solve that? So those are the main three things that I've learned. And I've used those just in my professional career, and I've seen massive returns by doing that.
That's awesome. That's great. So talking a little bit about what I thought was super interesting was like that frameworks piece. And I don't know all the people that are going to be listening in and things like that. But I think that's something that everyone can kind of benefit from, is having those kind of like tight guardrails. So like in terms of that, what are some of the better like frameworks that you've kind of helped people implement? And like, if you have like an example as well that you could kind of share out, so someone that's listening that maybe doesn't have that kind of structure can kind of go away and implement as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about how you develop your own frameworks, and I'll give you all two to go execute, because we only let a certain amount of time. I can't give it to you all, but I'll give you two. So when you think about a framework, you need to look at what you're doing and like write it out. So like, you make a cold call, okay? You do your intro. How did you go about and do that intro? What did that even mean? When you did your value prop, why did you do the value prop that way? Why did you close your call that way? Right? What are tones that you used? And then you back into how you're getting results, and then you just write out like, how did you do that? And then you can develop a framework that's like, oh, like, even though I said something different each time, I had a consistent framework that fit into, right? And then now I can see success from there. So again, I'll go into two ones that you'll see where I use the same exact saying that I just did and how their framework. So one is like, if I'm doing a voice note on LinkedIn, or I'm doing a video prospecting email or on LinkedIn. Most people, when they think of video, it's very daunting. It's like, oh, video, it's a lot. I don't know. I could do video. It's too much, right? Like, okay, it's not as difficult as we make it to be. It's very, very simple. So a video, you want to keep it 45 to 60 seconds. Less than 60 seconds is the goal. When you do that, I have a formula or framework called a 10-30-10. It's super simple. The first 10 seconds is the reason for your video. 30 seconds is the value prop. So what are you offering that person? And then the last 10 seconds is a call to action. And that's it. So, hey, the reason why you're making this video, you did some research. The 30 seconds is the value prop that you could take from an email or a call and insert it. And the last 10 seconds is a call to action to get them to engage with you. 10-30-10 is one of those frameworks. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a quick question for you. So like, I'm sure you weren't just born with this natural like mindset to build, like, just create framework around everything you do. And I'm assuming you didn't pick it up at Sky Zone from maybe your manager there. Where in your career, at like what point did you start picking this up? Was it when you were at JB? Was it before? Was it when you were an SDR that you started doing this?
That is a great question. So I subconsciously have always done it. I didn't consciously start doing it until I was at JB. John and I had a conversation, and we were talking about how I could deliver content and I would speak it from like my lens and I'd be like, this is how you do this. And it's how you do it. But it was hard for people to grasp because it was like what I did. So people couldn't relate to it. They're like, oh, that's a lot. You did it, but I can't do that. So I had to take a step back and be like, what should I do? Oh, a framework, right? Because we talked about in our training when I was there, we talked about science versus art. So we talked about the science, right? A science has a logical path typically to get to X output. Math is also the same way. When I was in school, I liked math. So I thought about, okay, well, there's frameworks and formulas when it comes to math, like 2 times 2 equals 4. Like you can't debate that, right? 4 times 2 is 8. So then I was like, okay, well, if I create frameworks in sales or in marketing or in my brand, these are consistent things that you cannot deconstruct them. This is what remains to be true. This will work. You just have to execute on it in order to be successful. So that's when I started being like, you know what? This is what I'm going to start focusing on. Creating frameworks so that anytime anyone's like, how do you do an email? I have a framework. Cold calling, I have a framework. It's just easier for you to absorb that than me telling you how I did it, how I talked about it. And I could do that if you want me to, but it's harder for you to learn that way.
I'll turn this over to Jay real quick, but I do have a quick follow-up. Like in sales, do you think it's mostly math, mostly math and science, mostly art, or like what's the mixture of both of it? It's a little bit of both.
So here's the answer. I'll debate with you on this answer, and you can be like, Morgan, you're wrong. And I'd be like, well, no, this is right. So the thing is, when it comes to science and art, it is more science at the beginning of the sales cycle. And what I mean by that is like from the prospecting in, and as you get closer to the sale, it becomes more art, right? The negotiation, the closing, how you handle with decision makers, right? That becomes more of your style, your art, and you really got to know what you're doing, right? Science and art are always integrated, but it's way more science when it comes to prospecting than it is art, in my belief, right? Because it's like, it's basically input, outputs, and A/B testing. That's a lot of what prospecting is. As you get further down the line and you start negotiating things of that nature, yeah, there are inputs and outputs, but you're dealing with like more of emotions because like now they're involved in the sales cycle. You've had multiple calls. Now you're dealing with people's emotions. You got to have a really good art style and to figure out how to deal with people, which is why it's more art as you get towards the close.
I think that's where I think working with Jay, who I've knowing him for a year now, he leans towards that math science side, and I was always more the art form like person. So like he has taught me quite a lot in this year of working together, and I'm about to go do a powwow with him for 2 days, and I feel like it's going to be 2 days of math class and science class.
Math class.
Yeah, I mean, we need a little bit of both, right? So. Yeah, I mean, you need a little bit of both to make it all work out, which is great. Which I think that's where like getting to work on a team or anything like that, and a lot of the SDRs that are out there do get to have some sort of like team function and things like that, and get that feedback. So that's kind of great to kind of learn and grow, I think, as an individual over there. Like if you're not as strong in that art piece or you're not as strong in that math piece. So speaking to that SDR like function, so we talked about frameworks. I think that's a really cool thing that a lot of people can take away. And I know one thing that you talk about as well is like, that evolution of that SDR role. So kind of like looking out in the future, I feel like I know for marketing, things have changed significantly since I've been in marketing. What is the kind of future of, that SDR role look like? So, it's frameworks, but what kind of other skills do you think that SDRs are going to need in the near future, and where can people find those skills to be able to level up their career?
Yeah, so let's talk about what I believe is gonna happen. This is my take. So we are heading towards downturn market. I think everyone's very aware of what's happening, and as we do that, my belief is that the sales teams will most likely have less people on their team, which will lead to potentially maybe less SDRs as a whole, which would lead to maybe more full sales cycle reps potentially. And then as a byproduct of that, you really have to then focus on, okay, we got to get better at first and foremost prospecting and how you go about building your pipeline. And that doesn't mean cold calling and cold emailing. I think it's actually a whole bucket of things. It's how are you getting tight on your referrals? I'm not saying every person needs to do this, but are you thinking about being a creator or being a curator instead of a creator? Like, how do you have what's your digital reputation? That's going to matter here in the next 5 to 10 years, right? If you're not active on online, it could be a hindrance to you. Now, again, I'm caveat. There are a lot of people who have never made appearances online and they're doing extremely well. That's amazing. I'm also just saying that, like, it would help you. It wouldn't hurt you. It would only help you to be active online as well to build that digital reputation, right? So as we go into this next couple months, I believe that a lot of the SDR teams that are inbound, I believe that will stay because a lot of people are running PLG motions, marketing starting to change. There's different avenues that are coming here, but I believe that the SDRs will actually start to be a little bit more hyper-focused in, hey, we're going to go after everybody in the world, and then that will allow for the quality to increase because automation's taking over from the quantity perspective. It's just like everyone's just blasting all these things out. So what does that come down to? Like, what should you be learning, right? You're like, Morgan, like, talking about SDRs are going away. Like, what are you saying? Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying you need to be mindful that the market is going to change and people are most likely going to go lean because of what we're seeing here, right? But that means that their quality and your skill set has to go up, right? This is a time to definitely skill up. It's definitely a time to get in order because you're going to see an upswing in the later side as things continue to probably get back to normal. Then you're going to see influx of a lot of hiring, a lot of things going on. But this is a time to scale up as people are figuring out what they want to do as you know, the next 12 to 18 months. So 3 skills that you could focus on, right? Number 1 skill, and this is talked about a lot, but I'm going to give a little bit more detail, is storytelling. Now, that doesn't mean, hey, go watch a Pixar movie and go figure out how to do storytelling. What I'm saying is you have to think about story sell, right? And if you think about customer stories, I would be spending an obnoxious amount of time learning how to tell stories of my customers. Like, what were their pain points? Why are they working with us? What results are we driving for them? Do you know the answers to those questions? If you don't, this is a time to understand how to really sell those stories, right? I think that's incredibly important to gain that skill set. Number 2, I believe this is a skill, is time management. Look, we're getting into a time where we've been in this hybrid virtual world. A lot of people right now are just like, oh, I'll just hang out for a bit. I'll go do this. I'll go do that. And everyone's all over the place. The bar, and y'all probably agree, the bar for quality outbound for an SDR, the bar to being successful as an outbound SDR, whether you'll believe it or not, is actually pretty low. Like, it's pretty low, right? I talk to teams and they're like, yeah, my teams make like 20 calls a week. What is going on? So like, I'm like, 20 calls a week? Like, the bar is low. That's all I gotta tell y'all. The bar is low. Okay. If people are making 20 calls a week, bar is low. You have a lot of opportunity to do things as long as you are proficient with the hours that you have. And here's where most people miss my message. They're gonna be like, oh, well, Morgan's talking about hustle culture, everyone work 18 hours. No, you don't need to do that. You just need to be efficient and actually be like, you know what? For 30 minutes, I'm going to do personalized emails. For 60 minutes, I'm going to do outbound videos. For 60 minutes, I'm going to do personalized emails. If you just can stay focused and be disciplined, you're going to beat most people because everyone is so scatterbrained right now. So if you can be like, I'm going to stick to this schedule for the next 90 days, I'll be successful. And I'm only speaking from experience. You know, the first 3 months when I was an SDR, I was not good. I did not hit quota. When I decided to focus and be disciplined on time management is when I started getting the number 1, number 2 spot and getting 200, 300% of quota. Like, that's the only reason that happened. I mean, there are other factors, but I stayed disciplined to my slots. And I was like, wow, this is what happens when you're actually consistent in what you do, right? So that's number 2. And number 3, when we think about skills, right, you might think about cold calling. Obviously, copywriting is something that people talk about quite a bit. You might be thinking about video, but that's actually not what I'm going to go with here. What I would actually be hyper focused on is how can you be a better leader and really focusing on the skill of leadership. Now, as an SDR, you're probably like, why would I need to learn leadership? Well, when you're talking to people, you are effectively invoking confidence for them to move forward with you to, schedule a meeting, right? So you want to be able to lead people just like you are leading people when you're cold calling and emailing. You want to have that skill set. So leadership is just a good skill set to have. And also as well, we just need more leaders in the space. Like, more strong leaders coming up is what we need. So that's just a skill that I would be hyper focused on, because it is something that's invaluable, because there aren't that many good ones. So you want to be able to be great there.
And Morgan, I can't like agree with you more. And like we're seeing it obviously on the recruiting front. Like layoffs are grabbing all the headlines right now. And honestly, from our perspective, it's companies just recognizing maybe they got a little too heavy in like who they were hiring, and they weren't lean and mean, and they weren't expecting a lot out of people. And you know, the bar was really low. And when people ask us, it's exactly what you said. It's perform and make yourself an invaluable piece of the company. So if you're out there creating and you're branded with your organization every single day, like you're going to be the last one out the door, not the first one that they're looking at. Like, oh, maybe you work 20 hours a week and do those 20 cold calls a week. Like that's a very easy person to replace right now.
Yeah.
It's big on building those habits. I want to flip it over to, we got a question in the chat over here, actually.
Oh, you're on Stone, baby.
Yeah, so it's a perfect tie-in actually to the next topic I wanted to bring up, which is personal brands, and building your personal brand. Morgan, I know you've got a really strong personal brand that you spent a lot of time building, and I think you talked about it as well. You know, being online is something that's going to be part of being your function as being a good salesperson, and that's something that can help you win more deals. So talking through building your personal brand as someone who's built a successful brand, what would you say for those people that are looking to get started? Like, what are 3 things that they can do if they haven't been active or done anything in that regards? Like they can like close this, whether they're watching from the phone or the computer or whatever that is, and go do and start getting active.
Yeah. So brand, I feel like this is like, let's talk about what like most people think it is and why most people don't do it. So you probably see my setup right now, right? I got the mic, I got green light in the corner, I got the purple background, right? Like there's other wires of other things that are happening. I got other stuff in the background too. So like there's a lot happening. So you probably see this and you're like, what? I don't want to do that. I don't have time for it. I don't care. Morgan, I'm done. I don't want to get the camera, the mic, the headset. This is insane. Cool. I get that. You don't have to do that. That's my whole point, is the amount of content that comes out and what you may be seeing might be overwhelming to you. And I understand that. I've been there when I started 6 years ago. But the thing is that you have to start somewhere, and you have to think about digital reputation, is what I'm going to keep saying. So personal brand, that might sound icky to you. I want you to think about it as like, what is my digital reputation? And here's the thing about the digital reputation. Whether you like it or not, someone is defining that for you right now. Yep. If you're not posting, someone's defining it for you. I don't know who. I can't call them out. I can't help you with that, but someone is. So I'm like, I might as well take control of that. Why not? So when you think about this, y'all notice I like 3. And the reason I pick 3 is it actually goes back to something we talked about earlier. When I was training, I realized that I would say, here are 5 things, 6 things, and people sometimes couldn't like comprehend, or they would just be too much information. But when I said, hey, these are 3 things, I found that more people would write down the 3 things than when I said 5, 4, even 2. So that's why I always say 3, just so y'all know that. So anyways, 3 things. So number 1 is you really got to think about this, is like, what do you want to be known for? Why are you doing this in the first place? If you're like, hey, I want to like create content so I can get a lot of likes and get a lot of dopamine hits. I mean, again, you can do that, and that if that's you, that's fine. But overall, like, you're not going to be successful as you would like. Just letting you know right now, it's probably not going to pan out well for you. So you want to know what you would be known for. Is it, hey, I want to start creating content because I eventually want to be a sales trainer and a sales coach, and I want to do what maybe John or Morgan, or just talk to them like Jason Bay, or like I don't know, whoever you want to be. Great, awesome. Then that makes sense for you. Start doing content that way. Or you're like, some people, they're like, you know what? I just want to create content so I can sell to my audience. Well, your approach is going to be different. You're not going to get the same amount of likes and comments, but you will get leads and pipeline and revenue. Like I know people who they get like 6 to 10 likes on their posts, but they get leads and revenue that close business. Different game. You wouldn't know that, but that's what they're doing. So don't dismiss your content as in like, oh, I'm not getting likes and comments. It's like, no, like there's other avenues to this that can help you ultimately be successful. So there's that piece. So number 1, as what I'm going to say here, is that you want to be a curator instead of a creator. I said this earlier. You want to take a blog post, right? I'll give a tactical example. Take a blog post in whatever industry you're in. I don't really care. HR, IT, marketing, sales, I don't care. And then figure out, okay, read it, right? Because as a seller, what should you be doing? You should be wanting to educate yourself in the market to understand your customer, to close more opportunities. As just a professional, you should want to educate yourself to get better at your role, to eventually get promoted. Majority of people. So read what you already were supposed to read anyways, and then provide your context around that. Hey, read this blog post on Sunday, thought it was really good. Here are my 3 things I liked about it. Tag the author. You're going to get like a 95% connect rate. Because most people don't do that. They don't like take the time to read the article, then add their 2 cents, and then tag the author. The author's fired up because they actually put a piece out there and now they get recognized. That doesn't happen often. And it could happen often if you started doing stuff like that. So that's important. Number 2 is when you're thinking about creating a brand, one of the things, and I see it's one of the questions in the chat here, is making sure your headline's on point. Look, if you just say, I'm an AE, I'm an SDR, nobody cares. There's a lot of SDRs, there's a lot of AEs. It really has no difference when I see that on a profile. So you need to establish, how do you actually help solve, empower your buyer persona? Again, I don't know that. You do. So then you need to change your headline to how you do that. So people lean in, they listen to you, they're willing to talk. The last piece is when you're thinking about creating this brand, a lot of people will say creating your tribe, creating your community, and that will change over time. Mine has definitely changed over time. And, I'm identifying, right now, okay, like what type of audience am I looking at? How has it changed? I mean, it's been 6 years of creating content. So a lot of people that were SDRs are clearly not SDRs anymore. Like that, you gotta adjust with the people as they grow with you. And what I will say is, though, as you're starting out, is engage with every person. So if someone likes your content, message them. If someone comments, comment back, message them. Start building it that way so that people will engage. So those are just a couple things you can do.
Morgan, I have a question for you on building like social brand. Like a lot of people are getting laid off right now. Like, do you think it's impactful for somebody who's laid off and a job seeker to like be building their online brand and online presence as they go through that process?
That is a really good question. My thought process on this, so before I even answer the brand question, is if you decide not to do what I'm going to tell you to do, you should not be just sitting idly or going and being like, hey, I want to like send out a million like I would be very thoughtful first and foremost, and this will go to the advice. I'd be very thoughtful about who do you want to work with. Again, I don't care if you're in IT, marketing, sales, HR. I had a lot of conversations during COVID to help people get jobs, like in all industries. Like, yeah. I have an understanding of like, this is how you do an interview. I actually enjoy doing interviews. If I could go do an interview, I would go do that. I'm not going to, but I would, because I like the process. But the whole point is that like any role, I have an understanding of how to go out and get it. It literally tells you the job description on what to do. My point is, you have to identify, though, if you're going to build it. Remember what I said. You have to know what you stand for. So if you're just like building a brand to build a brand, you might attract the wrong people. You might just get attracted by the wrong people, and then now you're interviewing with companies that like don't have the right values as you, and now you're like, this is not what I really wanted. So figure out your 5 to 7 companies you want to work for that look cool. Figure out the roles, and then start building your digital reputation around that role that you want. So maybe you start talking about, I want to be a digital marketing manager. So yeah, you probably should start talking about how you want to be a digital marketing manager. Start talking about the podcast you're listening to. Start talking about the research that you're doing. Yeah. Start tagging the companies that you want to go after and do that. So I can't answer the question is like, go build your brand, because it's too broad and it's too out there, because you're going to attract people that you might not want. You need to figure out, first of all, who do I want to work with? What leaders, right, do I want to work with? What role do I want? And then start creating the content for that.
Who I've seen, especially like spike up during COVID, it was people that were transitioning into like tech sales and SaaS and CSMs or marketing from other industries. Those were the ones that like seemed so focused on building like an online job search brand for a specific role. It was like you want to say they willed themselves into a job, but they didn't. They attracted the right people. They were building themselves in the right community, and that's how they landed. I've seen a lot of them do it actually. So I think people need to embrace that again right now.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think one other thing that you talked about that was really interesting, that you kind of alluded to as well, was like when you're going to find that dream role, it's as much about you figuring out whether this company matches with your values as well. I think maybe some other people that are earlier in their career might be just looking to, find that first role or find that second role, and not really looking to interview the company as much. Like, can you speak a little bit to like how important it is to kind of have that values match and what that kind of means for your success, in your role?
Yeah. So, well, I'm gonna flip the question back to y'all. It could be like a yes or no. We don't need to go too deep. But do you all have personal values?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Chris hesitated there. I don't know if he really does.
Absolutely. Actually, it's part of the reason why I started Captivate Talent, because our first value here is be human. And I felt, being in recruiting for about 10 years before this, that the human element was gone from recruiting. And it was like blew my mind that we're transacting in humans getting jobs. It
Yeah.
was like a core thing in their life. And it turns into like, I mean, I work for companies that told you to treat people like products. And I was like, this is not how you do it.
Like, what's happening?
So,
yeah.
It's not how you win long term.
No, it's not. And I'm glad y'all answered that way. So I do as well. And I would probably say like 75 to 80% of people don't have values written down. You can say, oh, I have values, but like you don't have them written down. So they're not really set in stone. Like, that's my thing. If you don't have them written down, like I have a document, like literally it's written down. It's like, here are the core values. Here's like the values that I would have in, people that I would associate with. Like, if we don't align with values, like it's just not going to work out. Just period. So that's like the first step before we talk about, hey, like how would you go about like the interview process and how you need to know your values. And this should, I think a lot of people probably have like started to like wake up, and they've seen how a lot of companies are treating the layoffs and how they're going about it.
Yep.
Like, there's some very sus stories out here. like I've seen them. Like, I haven't said anything, but like here I am. Yeah, a lot of stories are suspect. I'm like, okay, that's weird. Like, come on. So the thing is, I'm not going to be a what do they call it? A backseat sideline QB CEO. I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to tell you is you need to know your values, because as you evaluate whether you got laid off, you want to look at a new opportunity, or you're great, but maybe you potentially could always look for another one, or you start your own thing. You need to have values, because that's what's going to separate a lot of these decisions. Like, the money could be great. Oh my gosh, the equity stuff, this is crazy. We're going to skyrocket. We're going to the moon. But if the values aren't aligned, you're not going to probably go far, and you're going to butt heads, and it's not going to work. And you're not going to feel fulfilled. It's going to drain you. And like, it's just like an energy and spirit thing for me. Like, that's going a little bit deep, but like, that's what it really is. So if we really want to look at this the right way, you need to understand, what are your values? Like, write down 5, it could evolve over time, but like, know what your values are, and then ask questions to see like, what are the company values? What is your manager's values? What is the CEO's values? That will then align to be like, how do I align with this company? Because just as much as a company's interviewing you to see if you're fit, you're also interviewing the company to see like, am I a fit within an organization? Like, do I actually want to join? The employer side also has that key piece as well. The employer and the employee may have to make that decision on both ends to be like, is this the right fit for me? And the person who is being interviewed, you have the right to say, this isn't for me. Like, this doesn't really align my values. Even if it seems like a good fit, it's not. And that's how I tell people to treat that. And the last thing that I'll say is, and y'all probably tell this to people as well, please make sure that you have at least 2 to 3 questions at the end of every single interview slot. Like, please don't just be like, oh, I have no questions. Like, that's terrible. Like, have 2 to 3 questions, be thoughtful, like, prepare yourself. That's going to make you stand out. And I know the follow-up thank you note is also key as well, but what's really important is those 2 to 3 questions.
Oh, please send a follow-up thank you note. Always send a follow-up. If there's anyone that's interviewing through us right now, please send that follow-up thank you note tonight if you haven't already.
Write it up before you go for the interview. Have it in your drafts and go back, and you can fill in some details and send it out and schedule it. So,
Morgan, that's sage advice though. Not only should you be writing down your values, but if you have the opportunity at this point in your career to interview with a founder or a CEO, if you ask them and they can't give you a good answer, or the answer isn't similar to what you wrote down, like, it's not going to be a long-term fit for you. You're probably going to be on the market in 6 months.
Yeah. quick, and then now it's a revolving door, and like it's just I don't want that for people. I really want y'all to like write that down.
They're using the word
Yeah, and I think that
when
talks
people look
about
at you.
yeah, and I think that talks about, you know, building that personal brand. It's not even just like having that digital presence too. Like you're basically like it's kind of like now you're building your own like personal company, which is your version for yourself, right? Companies have values, people have values, companies have digital presences, people have digital presences. So in that sense, it kind of totally makes sense. One thing I wanted to talk about as well and ask is you know, I think especially with like layoffs and how much digitalization there's been in the last like couple of years, like with personal brands and you know so many other opportunities that are available, careers are becoming less linear. And so speaking to
Yeah.
that piece, like looking back on your own career, is there anything that you would have done differently in your career? And like if you have any advice to share over there or anything to kind of speak on nonlinear careers as well, I think it would be really helpful.
That's such a great question. So it comes down to a couple things. I think number one is I've started to do this more recently, and it's more of a like I'll be very transparent. It's more of an insecurity ego thing that I'm going to say, and it's something I had to realize for myself and get over really quickly. So especially if you're like in sales, you come in and you're like, I know everything. I'm an SDR for like 2 weeks and I know everything. Like I can do a cold call, I can email, I can do everything. I'm amazing, right? I got it. And so before I had joined as an SDR, to give people context, I had a public speaking business. So I was going into like schools, even like colleges, and doing public talks. So I was like, look, I did this from like the ground up, and I go in and speak to large audiences. I can go cold call someone on the phone. This is not going to be that hard, right? I was wrong. So the thing is, like, just because like you're good at something doesn't mean it's going to immediately translate. So what I wish I would have done earlier, and I've gotten better at this over time. But when I say earlier, I'm talking about the first maybe 2 to 3 years, right when I got out of when I got my first job, is when I'm not good at something, immediately going to someone being like, I'm not good at this. I need your help. I'm not good at this. Give me like 30 minutes. Give me an hour, hour and a half. I have no idea what I'm doing. And just sitting there and just accepting like constructive criticism to hone yourself. I personally had, and it wasn't like an arrogant ego. It's just we all have egos of being like, I got it. I got it. And that's how I grew up. Like I asked for help. My dad's amazing. We're really close. But he was always like, go find it out in the dictionary. Like, go Google it. So like, I was like, that's what I did. I just always was like, I'm just going to go figure it out. Cause like, that's how I grew up. And so, but now I've realized like there are people out there who are willing to help you. Like if someone is good at X thing, why would you not go and say, hey, can I spend an hour with you? Cause like, I'm stuck here. That's very difficult for most people to say, especially like in times now where it's like, hey, like I need help hard. Cause you're being vulnerable. You're admitting you don't know what you're doing in a culture and a society where you go on social media and everyone is an 8-9 figure business owner, right? So you're like, oh, I guess I should just figure it out. So it creates pressure. Like you're on social media, like people are like, oh, this person hit 300% of quota. Like, why am I not doing that? I guess to figure out myself. I'm not gonna ask for help. Don't fall into that trap. Like, be like, hey, like I don't know what I'm doing here. I need help, and I can point to every single time when I've gone to someone saying, hey, you know what, like I have no idea what I'm doing here. Number one, they really appreciate it. 2, they're like, I wish more people would do it. 3, they helped me even more because they were like, you actually came to me and you didn't know what you're doing. You came from a very humble spot. Your guard is open for feedback. And I got more out of those sessions than any other session that I had, period. So that's something that I wish I would have just been more intentional about and focusing on certain areas on instead of like, I wasn't coasting, but like just being more intentional there. I think that's absolutely important. And the second thing is like, this will sound woo-woo, but like I've really leaned into it. And I think we could all probably speak to this, is like truly listening to your intuition. Like, don't let it deter you. Like if you're like, yo, I think that this might be the right move for me, and you feel it, listen to it. Vice versa. You're in an interview. Money sounds good, equity sounds good, but you have a bad feeling. You don't know why. You're like, this doesn't feel right. I don't know. Maybe I ask more questions. Maybe something's off. Every time I've had like, this doesn't feel right, an opportunity, like I'm like, I didn't do it. And then I found out like 3 months later, it's like, so-and-so, this is what happened. I was like, oh, okay. Like I knew I was feeling weird about it. This is what happened, right? So those are just things those are two main things. One is obviously, be more proactive, find people, like lower barriers. Two is it's more woo-woo, but like I've just found when you like feel off about something, you're like, okay, I need to like dig into that more. Like don't neglect that.
Morgan, I think you're so right. And I think of like myself too, like managing people, like not to sound like a boomer, but most of my career spent as a manager was in the office. It was like over a decade of being in the office with people. Like if you are out there and you are a junior in your career or even senior, like you need to ask for help because your manager, especially if they're a little older, like myself, like they're not used to having older employees sitting at home. They're still not used to it. It's 2 years in, but like the better part of their career, they've been in the office. They've been able to read people's face. They know when somebody doesn't understand something because they can look at them and see that. So yeah, ask for help. Like you need to be a little bit of a squeaky wheel sometimes. Be selfish with that. Morgan, I'm actually super curious. I listened to a podcast, Verticals that you were on, or Vertical.
Oh yeah.
Verticals podcast this morning.
Verticals,
It was alluding into what you're up to next or what you're up to now, because I've noticed some things have changed in your LinkedIn. But I stopped myself before you gave the answer because I wanted to wait until now to ask. So what's going on in the world of Morgan J. Ingram, and is Muffins with Morgan coming back?
Oh, the big question. So I'm in an evolution. It's a 2-part question. So I'm in an evolution phase, and this is a phase that has been very interesting for me. It's been very eye-opening as I've continuously learned different things. It's important to state this point. 6 years ago, I started creating content. Probably, out of the few people that have been doing it for that tenure of content creation, and I've just learned so much about myself and the way that I want to articulate content. So the first thing that I'll say is I've done a lot of sales training. I've done a lot of sales coaching. I've really been tapping into in the past couple months, identifying what do I want to do and what's going to give me fulfillment and what's going to drive me towards the lifestyle that I ultimately want. So I'm actually leaning more towards B2B influencer marketing. I feel like this is an area that is untapped. B2C influencer marketing, we have seen that on a multitude of different levels, but B2B influencer marketing is right on the cusp and people are still identifying and figuring it out. I believe that the B2B influencer marketing is the future of sales and marketing. And I'll even add in here and product. And that's a different conversation for another time. But I'm really building a model and really building an organization and company that I'm building right now around this concept and really elevating people's content and really elevating across the board, even video content. So that's what I'm working on right now. Stay tuned in the new year. I'll say exactly what that's going to look like as I fine tune some things. And then the second part is Muffins and Morgan is coming back. So I had a crazy whiteboard session the other day. It's going to be even better than season 1. I'm really excited to bring it back. That's probably one of my favorite projects I've done. So it will be back. We'll probably get y'all both on. We'll have some fun with it. And we can't wait. It'll be a good time.
Morgan, so your thought is, hey, there's a lot of these influencers out there that maybe do some B2B stuff, but like, can I create an org around this? Like a business model and a true company, as opposed to, you see like a person do like a plug here and there and that type of stuff.
Yeah, ultimately, like for me, like that's not a scalable thing.
Yeah.
For me to do that personally, I could, but that's not as exciting. Like I will do it for people. I have done it for brands, and I understand that there's a capacity for that, and people will do it. However, in just seeing where things are going, I've done a lot of research. I'm talking to brands. I'm seeing where their heads are at. I'm also seeing where the future of things are going, and I see how people are buying and how buyers are more informed. Okay, well, that's actually going to be a thing. It's just understanding how do you do that, right? That's what I'm identifying right now. But I believe there is an actual scalable model there that I'm just tweaking and figuring out along the way.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward for that for the new year. I'm sure you're going to make a splash and we're all going to see it, right? It's going to pop up.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Cool. Awesome.
I have one more question for you, then I'll let Jay close it out. I'm a foodie, and I always want to know, like, what is your go-to meal, like big, like what's your craving, favorite thing, restaurant? What is it?
Okay. So my craving is sushi. I love sushi. I will literally be in the sushi restaurant, sake, everything. Just post. I literally just go by myself sometimes. I don't even care. I'm like, this is just good. I don't care at all.
And
Like, but that's the
you're
thing though.
right
I
outside
actually like
Atlanta,
going.
right?
I like going. Yeah. So yeah. So I like going to restaurants by myself. I like going to movies by myself. Like, is there something very therapeutic about that? Like, just going to places by yourself. I know there's obviously certain spectrums and things where you wouldn't want to do that. I get that, but for me, like, I like doing that. So when I go get sushi, typically I'm gonna get like a dragon roll. I'll get like a spider roll. But there's some places that I go to that are like, if they're near the coastline, they'll have even more like eccentric things. So when I was in Singapore, they had the crazy, like, I was in there, I probably ate like 30 rolls. Like, I couldn't even move after. I was just like, let's go. Cause like this, so in the sushi spot, you order the sushi and it like slides out to you like in like a train. So it just like they make it and they just so it just keeps coming. So I was just like, all right, like I don't really care right now. I'm just gonna run this up. So I was just like, oh, this looks interesting. And so it just like slide out, and I'm just sitting there like eating. And all these people are like, this tourist is crazy. I was like, yeah, I don't know. We don't have this in Atlanta, so I'm gonna do everything I can to experience this. So yeah, it was fun. It's a good time.
That's
I
impressive.
agree with you. Going to the movies alone, like when people say it's weird, like what are you doing? Are you talking to the person next to you? No, you're sitting in a dark theater. You're not saying a word for an hour and a half, 2 hours. Like you can go alone. It's totally normal.
The movies. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I don't really care. The movies is like the worst place to build a bond or a friendship. It's the worst. Actual
Terrible date spot. Terrible.
It's terrible.
Like second, third
terrible.
Date.
You're doing absolutely nothing. You're sitting in a movie theater for 2 hours, and then you say, "Oh, see you later." You actually accomplished nothing. You didn't deepen the relationship. You bonded over a movie, and then like it's over. Like I'm like that concept of like we're gonna deepen a relationship. No, that's not gonna happen.
One of my best friends and his wife, they will actually go to the movies and see separate movies together, or they'll go at the same time and go see separate movies, which I think is actually genius.
That's efficient.
Like relationship goals.
Yeah.
You get the movie you want.
Pick your candy, pick your movie, and then just see each other carpool at home.
Yeah, then you recap.
Jay, anything else on your side? I know we're running a little bit over on time, and Morgan, I know you are a busy man, so
no, this has been awesome. I guess one question we've got to ask before we always end the show is people want to connect with you or learn more about what you're doing, like where can they, what's the best place to go to?
Yeah, so hit me up on LinkedIn, Morgan J. Ingram. And then if you go to my LinkedIn profile, you'll see that I have a newsletter called The Commish. So it's weekly sales tips. I also have some productivity tips in there as well if you want to go check that out. So yeah, that's where I'm at. And if you want to connect with me, just hit me up.
Morgan, thank you so much. It was such a great opportunity to meet you live and in the flesh at SaaStr this year.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what you're doing. And thanks again for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate y'all.
Thanks, Morgan.